The billionaire turned the claimed virgin slum girl into a woman, a heartwarming love story. Hi, my beautiful family. Today I'm not just speaking as Mr. Peter, I'm speaking as a human being who deeply loves you. Since my return, I've seen something that truly hurts. My reach has dropped, and it makes me wonder, have I disappointed you? Is it the introductions? Is it the way I speak from the heart before the story begins? I know if I cut my intro short, my reach might go up again, but I chose not to, because I believed that our connection, our warmth, our love as a family meant more than numbers. I've been doing what no YouTuber dares to do, sacrificing growth for connection. And I did it with a full heart, because I wanted you to feel seen, loved, and prayed for. But if this continues, if I keep pouring my soul out and it's not what you want, then maybe it's time I take a step back. Maybe even disappear quietly forever. I don't say this for sympathy. I say it because I need to know, are we still a family? If you still want me here, please show me. One like, one comment, one share. That's all it takes to bring this family back to life. I love you all. I always have, but I can't keep giving my all into silence. Some say that fate whispers before it shouts, but on that sultry Manhattan evening when lightning split the sky like a lover's promise, destiny came crashing down with all the subtlety of thunder. Lily Morris pressed her back against the marble pillar of the Orton Grand Hotel, her 25-year-old heart hammering as another flash of lightning illuminated the storm-darkened street. The silk blouse she'd borrowed from her roommate clung to her skin, soaked through from her desperate sprint across 3 city blocks. The catering event at the Penthouse Gallery had run late, and now she was trapped in the most expensive hotel lobby in Manhattan, looking like a drowned cat while surrounded by crystal chandeliers and women who probably spent more on their shoes than Lily made in a month. Perfect, she whispered to herself, pushing wet curls away from her face. Just perfect. She'd known taking this catering gig was risky. Elite Manhattan art gallery events weren't exactly her usual territory, but the pay was too good to refuse, and her grandmother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. Now she was stranded without an umbrella, watching sheets of rain cascade down the floor-to-ceiling windows like liquid silver. The hotel lobby was a study in understated luxury, all warm marble, soft lighting, and that particular hush that money could buy. A few well-dressed guests moved through the space with the unhurried confidence of people who'd never worried about cab fare or whether their phone bill would bounce. Lily felt painfully out of place, but the alternative was getting struck by lightning, so she pressed herself deeper into the shadows and hoped no one would notice the soaking wet caterer lurking by the entrance. That's when she saw him. Jared Orton emerged from the private elevator like something out of a dream, or maybe a very dangerous fantasy. At 38, he possessed the kind of masculine beauty that stopped conversations and made smart women do foolish things. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his fingers through it, and his white dress shirt was open at the collar, revealing a tantalizing glimpse of the strong throat that had graced the cover of Forbes magazine just last month. He moved with the fluid grace of a man completely comfortable in his own skin, completely unaware of the way every woman in the lobby had suddenly found reasons to linger. Lily couldn't breathe. She'd seen his picture in magazines, of course. Every woman in New York had seen Jared Orton's picture. The tragically widowed billionaire with eyes like storm clouds and a smile that could launch 1,000 fantasies. But photographs had done nothing to prepare her for the raw magnetism of his presence, the way he seemed to command space without effort, the dangerous kind of male beauty that made sensible women forget their own names. He was walking toward the entrance, toward her, and Lily realized with growing horror that her hiding spot was directly in his path. She tried to make herself smaller, but there was nowhere to go that wouldn't involve running across the marble floor like a startled deer. Another flash of lightning lit up the lobby, followed immediately by a crack of thunder so loud it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The lights flickered, someone gasped, and in that moment of electrical chaos, Jared Orton looked directly at her. Their eyes met across 20 feet of marble and money, and Lily felt lightning shoot through her veins that had nothing to do with the storm raging outside. His gaze was intense, penetrating, the kind of look that seemed to see straight through pretense to the woman beneath. For a heartbeat that felt like forever, they simply stared at each other, the billionaire prince and the soaking wet caterer, while the storm raged around them. Then the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, casting everything in a soft, intimate glow. But in that moment of darkness, Lily panicked. She pushed away from the pillar and took a step toward what she hoped was the ladies' room, somewhere she could hide until the storm passed and the lights came back on. But the marble floor was slick from the rain she'd tracked in, and her borrowed heels, already precarious, betrayed her completely. She felt herself falling, a slow-motion tumble that was going to end with her sprawled across the marble floor of Manhattan's most exclusive hotel lobby. She closed her eyes and braced for impact and humiliation. Instead, she found herself caught against a chest that felt like warm steel, surrounded by arms that were strong enough to stop her fall and gentle enough to make her feel safe. The scent that enveloped her was purely masculine, sandalwood and something crisp and clean that made her want to press closer and breathe him in. "Easy there," said a voice like aged whiskey, warm and smooth, with just a hint of roughness that made her stomach flutter. "I've got you." Lily opened her eyes and found herself staring into a face that was even more devastating up close. Jared Orton's storm-grey eyes were looking down at her with an expression of concern mixed with something else, something heated and intense that made her skin tingle. His features were sharp and aristocratic, but there was warmth in them too, a hint of vulnerability that the magazines never captured. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and she realized she was still pressed against his chest, his arms still around her, neither of them making any move to step away. Lily started to say she was fine, but the word caught in her throat. She wasn't fine. She was drowning in the storm-grey depths of his eyes, lost in the feeling of being held by this beautiful, dangerous man who looked at her like she was something precious instead of a dripping wet disaster. "You're soaked," he said softly, one hand coming up to brush a strand of wet hair away from her face. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, and Lily felt heat bloom everywhere his fingers had been. "The storm," she managed to whisper, proud of herself for forming actual words. "I got caught in the storm." "So I see." His mouth curved into a smile that was absolutely lethal, the kind of smile that could make a woman forget her own moral code. "Lucky for me." Lucky. The word came out breathier than she'd intended, but she couldn't seem to control her voice any more than she could control her racing heart. "If there hadn't been a storm," he said, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone in a caress so soft she might have imagined it, "you wouldn't have run into my lobby, and I wouldn't have had the chance to catch you." The lights flickered back on, but neither of them moved. They stood frozen in that moment, surrounded by the soft murmur of other guests and the distant rumble of thunder, but it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Lily was achingly aware of everywhere their bodies touched, his arms around her waist, her hands pressed against his chest, the way she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through his shirt. "I should—" she started, but trailed off because she had no idea what she should do. What was the protocol for finding yourself in the arms of a billionaire who looked at you like you were the answer to prayers you hadn't known he was saying? "Should what?" he asked, and there was something almost vulnerable in the question, as if her answer mattered more than it should. "I should get out of your way," she said, though every cell in her body was screaming at her to stay exactly where she was. "I'm just waiting for the storm to pass." "Are you—" His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed in the most delicious way. "Just waiting for the storm to pass?" There was something in his voice, something that suggested he wasn't just talking about the weather. Lily felt heat pool low in her belly, a wanting so sharp it took her breath away. This was insane. She didn't even know this man, had never experienced attraction this immediate and overwhelming, but looking into his eyes, feeling the solid warmth of him against her, she couldn't bring herself to care about sanity. "What else would I be waiting for?" she whispered. "Me," he said simply, and the single word hit her like lightning. "You could be waiting for me." The admission hung between them, raw and honest and completely insane. Lily knew she should laugh it off, should step away from this beautiful, dangerous man and his beautiful, dangerous words. But instead, she found herself leaning closer, drawn by something stronger than common sense. "I don't even know your name," she breathed. "Jared," he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like need. "Jared Orton, and you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life." Heat flooded through her at the raw honesty in his voice. "I'm Lily," she managed. "Lily Morris, and I think you might be dangerous." His smile was pure sin. "I think you might be right." The storm outside was beginning to quiet, but inside the hotel lobby, inside the circle of Jared's arms, Lily felt like she was standing in the eye of a hurricane. Everything about this moment felt charged with possibility, heavy with the kind of attraction that could change everything. "The storm's passing," she said, though she made no move to step away. "Is it?" Jared's eyes never left her face. "Because I feel like mine is just beginning." And as thunder rolled across Manhattan one more time, Lily Morris realized that her carefully ordered life had just been struck by lightning, in the form of a man who looked at her like she was magic itself. She should run. She should definitely run. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was, caught in the storm of Jared Orton's eyes, and let herself fall. Chapter 2. Forbidden Desires. 3 days after the storm, Jared Orton discovered that a woman could haunt a man's dreams without even knowing his last name. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city stretch endlessly below, but all he could see were storm-dark eyes and rain-soaked curls. Lily Morris. Even her name was like music, something lyrical and warm that rolled off his tongue like a prayer. He'd replayed their encounter 1,000 times, remembered every detail, the way she'd felt in his arms, the breathless catch in her voice when she'd said his name, the electricity that had arced between them like a living thing. He was losing his mind. "Sir." His assistant, Sebastian Sterling, appeared in the doorway, immaculate as always in his perfectly tailored suit. Sebastian had been his best friend since Harvard, the only person who could read Jared's moods like a book, and the only one brave enough to call him on his bullshit. "The quarterly reports you requested." Jared didn't turn around. "Sebastian, have you ever met someone who completely altered your understanding of the universe in the span of 5 minutes? There was a pause. "Are we talking about the woman from the hotel lobby? The one you've been brooding about for 3 days straight?" "I don't brood," Jared said automatically. "You're literally staring out the window with the expression of a man contemplating the meaning of life. That's brooding." Sebastian set the reports on the desk and moved to stand beside his friend. "What's really going on here, Jared? You meet beautiful women every day. Hell, Celeste Beaumont has been throwing herself at you for months." At the mention of his late wife's sister, Jared's jaw tightened. Celeste had been relentless in her pursuit since Maria's death 5 years ago, convinced that marrying her would somehow honor Maria's memory. The truth was, Celeste reminded him of everything he'd lost, everything he could never have again. She was beautiful, sophisticated, exactly the kind of woman he was supposed to want. She was nothing like Lily Morris. "This is different," Jared said quietly. "Different how?" "She looked at me like I was just a man," Jared admitted. "Not a portfolio, not a business opportunity, not a way to climb the social ladder, just..." A man. Sebastian's expression softened with understanding. And that terrifies you. Shouldn't it? Jared turned away from the window, running a hand through his dark hair. I buried my heart with Maria. I made peace with that. I built a good life on that foundation. And then this woman, this complete stranger, crashes into my arms, and suddenly I'm feeling things I swore I'd never feel again. Maybe that's not such a terrible thing, Sebastian said gently. Maria wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone, Jared. She loved you too much for that. The mention of his late wife sent the familiar pang through Jared's chest, but for the first time in 5 years, it wasn't accompanied by crushing guilt. Maria had been his college sweetheart, his first love. His wife of 8 years before cancer took her far too young. He'd loved her with the uncomplicated devotion of youth, and when she died, he'd been certain that kind of love only came once in a lifetime. But what he'd felt in the hotel lobby, holding Lily Morris in his arms, had been something entirely different. Not the comfortable love of long companionship, but something wild and electric and completely consuming. I don't even know anything about her, Jared said, though even as he spoke the words, he knew they were a lie. He'd hired the best private investigator in the city the morning after their encounter, had her full background report sitting in his desk drawer. Lily Morris, 25, born in Savannah, Georgia. Moved to New York 3 years ago with her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident. Worked multiple jobs to support her family, including evening shifts with a high-end catering company, the same catering company that serviced his hotels. So find out about her, Sebastian said pragmatically. You own half of Manhattan, Jared. How hard could it be to arrange another meeting? As if summoned by their conversation, Jared's private phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, his head of security. 3 days of discreet investigation had finally paid off. Located her. Prestige Cleaning Services. She works the penthouse rotation on Tuesdays and Fridays. Currently scheduled for your building tonight. Jared's pulse quickened. She's here, he said, more to himself than to Sebastian. Who's here? But Jared was already moving, striding out of his office with the single-minded determination that had built his empire. He'd spent 3 days having the best investigators in the city track down every detail about the mysterious woman from the storm. Not for any nefarious purpose, but because he couldn't get her out of his head, couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd felt in his arms, the way she'd looked at him like he was just a man instead of a bank account. Now he knew. Lily Morris, 25, worked multiple jobs, including evening shifts with Prestige Cleaning Services, the same company that maintained his hotels and residential properties. It wasn't stalking, he told himself, as he took the stairs instead of the elevator. It was strategic planning. He stood outside his own door for a full minute, hand on the keypad, heart hammering like a teenager about to ask someone to prom. This was insane. He was Jared Orton. He commanded boardrooms, negotiated billion-dollar deals, had been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine as one of the most powerful men under 40. He did not get nervous about talking to women, but as he pressed his palm to the scanner and heard the lock disengage, he realized he wasn't about to talk to just any woman. He was about to see Lily Morris again, and that changed everything. He found her in his kitchen, and the sight of her stopped him cold. She was on her hands and knees, cleaning the marble floor with meticulous care, completely absorbed in her work. She'd pulled her dark curls back into a ponytail, revealing the elegant line of her neck, and she was humming something soft and sweet under her breath. She wore simple black pants and a white polo shirt, the cleaning company's uniform, but somehow she made the practical clothes look graceful, feminine. Jared watched her for a long moment, drinking in the sight of her in his space, his sanctuary. His penthouse was a study in masculine minimalism, all clean lines and expensive materials, carefully curated to impress but never to welcome. But seeing Lily there, moving through his kitchen with unconscious grace. He realized that for the first time in 5 years, his home felt alive. "You're very thorough," he said softly. Lily's head snapped up, and when she saw him standing in the doorway, her eyes went wide with shock and something that looked like panic. She scrambled to her feet, smoothing down her ponytail and backing toward the sink as if she needed the support. "Mr. Orton," she breathed, and the way she said his name sent heat shooting straight through him. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were here. The concierge said the penthouse was empty and—" "It's fine," he said quickly, stepping into the kitchen and immediately regretting it as her intoxicating scent, something like jasmine and vanilla, surrounded him. "I live here, obviously. I just wasn't expecting— I didn't know you worked for the cleaning company." A flush crept up her neck. "It's my evening job," she said, and he could hear the defensive note in her voice. "I work for Prestige Cleaning Services 3 nights a week. Is that going to be a problem?" "Why would it be a problem?" "Because—" She gestured between them, encompassing the marble countertops, the view of Central Park, the obvious wealth surrounding them. "Because you're you and I'm me, and this is awkward enough without adding employer-employee dynamics to it." Jared moved closer, drawn by something stronger than common sense. "What's awkward about it?" Lily stared at him as if he'd asked why water was wet. "You're asking me what's awkward about the fact that I'm cleaning your kitchen 3 days after you?" She trailed off, color flooding her cheeks. "After I what?" he pressed, though he knew exactly what she was thinking. "After I held you like I never wanted to let you go. After I looked at you like you were the answer to every question I'd never known how to ask. After you caught me," she finished quietly. "Is that what I did?" Jared was close enough now to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, close enough to catch the subtle tremor in her hands as she gripped the edge of the counter. "Caught you?" "You know what I mean," she whispered. "I know what you said," he replied, his voice dropping to match hers. "But I don't think catching is the right word for what happened between us." The air between them crackled with the same electricity that had coursed through the hotel lobby during the storm. Lily's breathing had quickened, and Jared could see the rapid flutter of her pulse at the base of her throat. He wanted to press his lips there, wanted to taste her skin and feel the evidence of how he affected her. "I should go," she said, but she didn't move away from the counter, didn't break eye contact. "Should you?" he asked, echoing her words from the hotel. "Or should you stay and let me cook dinner for you?" Her eyes widened. "You cook?" "I do a lot of things that might surprise you," he said, moving to the refrigerator and pulling it open. "Are you allergic to anything?" "Mr. Orton—" "Jared," he corrected, and that wasn't really an answer to my question. Lily stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Billionaires didn't cook dinner for their cleaning staff. They didn't invite virtual strangers into their private sanctuaries. They certainly didn't stand in their kitchens, fighting the overwhelming urge to back a woman against the marble counter and kiss her until neither of them could think straight. But Jared had stopped caring about what billionaires did or didn't do the moment Lily Morris had fallen into his arms. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why what? Why do you want to cook for me? You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," he said, pulling vegetables from the refrigerator with movements that spoke of genuine familiarity with his kitchen. "I know you work multiple jobs to support your family. I know you're proud and independent, and that you have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. I know that when I held you during the storm, it felt like coming home for the first time in 5 years. The raw honesty in his voice made Lily's breath catch. "Jared, I know that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you for 3 days, he continued, his hands stilling on the vegetables as he looked at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. I know that seeing you here in my kitchen makes this place feel like a home instead of just somewhere I sleep. And I know that if you leave right now, I'm going to spend another 3 days wondering what might have happened if you'd stayed." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and want, and the kind of dangerous attraction that could change everything. Lily knew she should leave, should grab her cleaning supplies and walk out of this kitchen and never look back. Jared Orton was a complication she couldn't afford, a fantasy that could only end in heartbreak. But when she looked into his storm-grey eyes, when she saw the vulnerability beneath the confidence, when she remembered how it had felt to be held by him like she was something precious, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she whispered. "Dinner." His smile was brilliant, transforming his handsome face into something almost boyish with relief and joy. "Okay," he echoed. "Dinner." And as Jared Orton began to cook for her with movements that spoke of a man who found solace in creating something beautiful, Lily Morris realized she was about to cross a line she could never uncross. But looking at him, watching the way the evening light caught in his dark hair, feeling the way her heart raced just from being in the same room with him, she couldn't bring herself to care about lines or consequences or all the reasons this was impossible. All she cared about was the way he looked at her, like she was magic itself. Chapter 3. Hearts Under Fire. The way a man cooked, Lily discovered, could be more seductive than the most expensive cologne or the smoothest pickup line ever whispered. She sat perched on a bar stool at Jared's kitchen island, watching in fascination as he moved around his state-of-the-art kitchen with the fluid confidence of someone who genuinely loved what he was doing. He'd rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt, revealing strong forearms that flexed as he chopped vegetables with professional precision. His dark hair had fallen forward slightly, and every few minutes he'd push it back with the back of his hand in a gesture so unconsciously sexy that Lily had to grip her wineglass to keep from reaching out to touch him. "You're staring," he said without looking up from the risotto he was stirring, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm observing," she corrected, taking a sip of the wine he'd poured for her, something French and expensive that probably cost more than her rent. "I've never seen anyone cook like that." "Like what?" "Like you actually know what you're doing," she laughed softly. "Most men I know think cooking means heating up leftover pizza." Jared glanced at her, his grey eyes warm with amusement. "Most men you know clearly lack imagination." "And you don't?" "Not when it comes to things that matter," he said, his voice dropping to a tone that made heat pool low in her belly. "Cooking is about creation, about taking simple ingredients and transforming them into something beautiful. It's intimate." The way he said the word intimate made Lily's breath catch. Everything about this evening felt surreal, sitting in a penthouse that belonged in a magazine, watching a billionaire cook dinner for her while the lights of Manhattan twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. But more than that, it was the way Jared looked at her, like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever encountered, that made her feel like she was living in someone else's life. "Where did you learn to cook?" she asked, needing to focus on something other than the way his hands moved as he worked. "My grandmother," he said, adding cream to the risotto with movements that spoke of long practice. "She raised me after my parents died in a plane crash when I was 12. Nonna was Italian, came here with nothing but her recipes and her determination to make a better life. She taught me that food is love made tangible." The unexpected vulnerability in his voice made Lily's heart squeeze. "She sounds wonderful." She was. His expression softened with memory. "She used to say that a man who could cook would never be alone, because there would always be someone willing to sit at his table. I think she was trying to prepare me for life, but mostly she just wanted to make sure I could take care of myself." Smart woman. The smartest. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Lily felt that familiar electric current arc between them. "What about you? Who taught you about love? The question caught her off guard, partly because of how naturally he'd connected food and love, and partly because she couldn't remember the last time someone had asked her something so personal. My grandmother too, actually. After my parents died, she took me and my brother in without a second thought. Granny Esperanza. She raised us on sweet tea and stories about how love is supposed to feel like coming home to yourself. And does it? Jared asked quietly. Feel like coming home? Lily met his gaze across the kitchen island, and for a moment the air between them was so charged she could almost taste the tension. I wouldn't know, she admitted. I've never been in love. Something flickered in Jared's silver-flecked eyes. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. Never? I thought I was once, she said, surprised by her own honesty. But looking back, I think I was more in love with the idea of being in love than with the actual person. Jared turned off the heat under the risotto and moved around the island until he was standing directly in front of her. This close, she could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with the warm scent of cooking. What happened? He left me for someone with a trust fund and a Hamptons house, Lily said, trying for lightness, but hearing the old hurt creep into her voice anyway. Apparently, love wasn't enough to overcome the fact that I worked 3 jobs and lived in a studio apartment in Queens. Jared's jaw tightened, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. He was an idiot. Was he? Lily challenged. Or was he just practical? Love doesn't pay the bills, Jared. It doesn't cover medical expenses or keep the lights on. Sometimes being practical is the smart choice. Is that what you think? He moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. That love should be practical. I think love is a luxury some people can't afford, she whispered. But even as she said the words, she could feel herself drowning in the storm-grey depths of his eyes. What if you're wrong? His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. What if love isn't a luxury but a necessity? What if it's the thing that makes all the practical stuff worth doing? Lily's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. Jared, I know this is crazy, he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like desperation. I know we barely know each other, and I know you have every reason to think I'm just another rich man who's used to getting what he wants, but I need you to know that what I'm feeling right now has nothing to do with money or power or any of the things that usually define my life. What does it have to do with? She breathed. You, he said simply. Just you. The way you look at me like I'm just a man. The way you make me feel like I'm waking up after years of sleepwalking. The way you fit in my arms like you were made to be there. His words were doing dangerous things to her resolve, making her want to believe in fairy tales and happy endings and all the things she'd learned not to trust. You don't know me, she protested weakly. Then tell me, he said, his thumb still tracing patterns on her skin that were setting her on fire. Tell me who you are, what you want, what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night. I want to know everything, Lily. I want to know you. The raw honesty in his voice broke something open inside her chest. When was the last time someone had wanted to truly know her, not just what she could do for them or how she could make their life easier? When was the last time someone had looked at her like she was worth discovering? I want to own my own catering business, she found herself saying. Something small and personal, where I can create beautiful food for people's most important moments. I want to make enough money that my grandmother doesn't have to choose between her medications and her groceries. I want to fall asleep someday without worrying about whether my bank account will cover tomorrow's expenses. What else? He prompted softly. I want to travel, she continued, surprising herself with how easily the words came. I want to see the places my parents used to tell me about before they died. I want to taste real gelato in Italy and watch the sunrise over the pyramids and dance in the streets of Barcelona until my feet hurt." "And love?" Jared asked. "What do you want love to feel like?" Lily looked into his eyes, and the answer came from somewhere so deep she hadn't even known it existed. "Like lightning," she whispered. "Bright and dangerous and impossible to ignore. Like something that changes you forever, even if it destroys you in the process." Jared's eyes darkened, and his hand tightened on her face. "Lily." "The risotto's going to burn," she said desperately, needing to break the spell before she did something irreversible. "I don't care about the risotto," he said, his voice rough with want. "You should. You worked hard on it." "I can make more risotto," he said, stepping even closer until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I can't recreate this moment." He was right, and they both knew it. There was something happening between them that felt bigger than logic, stronger than all the reasons it shouldn't work. Lily could feel herself teetering on the edge of something that would change everything, and for the first time in her life she wanted to fall. "This is insane," she breathed. "Completely," he agreed, but he didn't step back. "You're a billionaire. I clean offices for a living. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and I'm just a man who's been alone for too long." "Jared!" His name came out like a prayer, and she saw something flare in his eyes at the sound. "Say it again," he commanded softly. "What?" "My name. Say my name like that again." "Jared," she whispered, and this time she did it deliberately, putting all her growing feelings into the single word. He groaned, a sound of pure male need that sent heat shooting through every nerve ending. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" Before she could answer, his phone rang, the sharp sound cutting through the charged atmosphere like a blade. Jared ignored it, but it rang again and again, until finally he stepped back with a curse. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling his phone from his pocket and glancing at the screen. His expression darkened. "I have to take this." Lily watched as he answered the call, his voice immediately shifting into the crisp, authoritative tone of a man used to handling crises. She couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand raked through his hair. "When?" he was saying. "How bad?" "No, don't call the police yet. I'll handle it." He hung up and turned back to her, and Lily could see the exact moment when the billionaire mask slipped back into place, when the man who'd been cooking dinner for her and asking about her dreams transformed back into Jared Orton, hotel magnate and master of the universe. "I'm sorry," he said, and she could hear the genuine regret in his voice. "There's a situation at one of my hotels. I have to go." "Of course," Lily said, sliding off the bar stool and immediately missing the warmth of his proximity. "I should go anyway. This was probably a mistake." "No," Jared said sharply, catching her hand as she moved toward her cleaning supplies. "This wasn't a mistake, Lily. This was the first real thing I've felt in 5 years. The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tight. "Jared." "Have dinner with me," he said, his fingers tightening on hers. "A real dinner, not just something I cook in my kitchen while you're supposed to be working. Let me take you somewhere beautiful and spend an entire evening learning everything about you." Lily stared at him, seeing the vulnerability beneath the confidence, the man beneath the billionaire. Every rational part of her knew she should say no, should walk away from this beautiful, dangerous man before she fell so hard she couldn't find her way back up. But looking into his storm-grey eyes, feeling the way her heart raced just from his touch, she realized it was already too late for rational thinking. "Okay," she heard herself say. "One dinner." His smile was blinding. "One dinner," he agreed, but they both knew it was a lie. "One dinner, would never be enough for what was building between them. One dinner was just the beginning. As Lily gathered her things and headed for the door, she could feel Jared's eyes on her, could feel the weight of possibility and promise in the air between them. She was walking into something that could destroy her carefully ordered life, something that went against every lesson she'd learned about protecting her heart. But for the first time in her 25 years, Lily Morris was ready to play with fire. Chapter 4. The Point of No Return. Some moments arrive like whispered secrets, stealing into your life so softly you don't realize they're changing everything until you're already transformed. But the night Jared Orton took Lily Morris to dinner at Alessandro's, their moment announced itself like a symphony reaching crescendo. Lily stood before her tiny bathroom mirror, hands trembling slightly as she applied the lipstick Amara had pressed into her palm that morning. "You're going on a date with Jared Orton," her roommate had said, eyes wide with disbelief and excitement. "The Jared Orton. Lily, honey, this is like Cinderella, but with better hair and actual chemistry." But looking at her reflection now, Lily felt more like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole than any fairy tale princess. She'd chosen her one good dress, a simple black number she'd found at a consignment shop, elegant in its simplicity, but nothing compared to the designer gowns she'd seen on the women in Jared's usual orbit. Her dark curls fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her grandmother's vintage pearl earrings were her only jewelry. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw something she'd never seen before, a woman ready to take a leap of faith. The knock on her door came at exactly 8 o'clock because Jared Orton was apparently the kind of man who considered punctuality a virtue. Lily took a deep breath, smoothed her dress one last time, and opened the door. And forgot how to breathe. If she'd thought Jared was stunning in a business suit, it was nothing compared to how he looked in dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater that hugged his broad shoulders like a second skin. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his fingers through it, and when he looked at her, his pewter eyes heated with something that made her knees weak. "You're beautiful," he said simply, his voice rough with something that sounded like awe. "Thank you," she managed, proud that her voice came out steady despite the way her heart was racing. "You look... wow." His smile was slow and devastating. "Wow, works for me." The restaurant Alessandro had chosen was like something out of a dream, a tiny Italian place tucked away in the village, with candle-lit tables and brick walls covered in trailing ivy. The owner, Alessandro Rivera, was a warm, silver-haired man who greeted Jared like family and looked at Lily with the kind of approval that made her feel instantly welcome. "Jared brings me his business associates," Alessandro said with a wink, as he led them to a secluded corner table. "But he has never brought me someone he looks at the way he looks at you, Bella." Lily felt heat flood her cheeks, but when she glanced at Jared, he wasn't denying it. If anything, he looked proud, like Alessandro had given him a compliment instead of calling out his obvious infatuation. "Alessandro has the best wine cellar in the city," Jared said as they settled into their seats, "and the most romantic atmosphere." "Is that what we're going for?" Lily asked, raising an eyebrow. "Romance? What would you call this?" he countered, his eyes never leaving her face. "Dangerous," she said honestly, and was rewarded with a laugh that was pure masculine appreciation. "I like dangerous," he said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his, "especially when it comes with beautiful brown eyes and a smile that makes me forget my own name." The wine Alessandro brought was perfect. The conversation flowed like they'd known each other for years instead of days. And by the time their entrees arrived, Lily had forgotten about the differences in their bank accounts, their social status, all the reasons this shouldn't work. All she could focus on was the way Jared looked at her, like she was the most fascinating person in the world. The way he listened to her stories about growing up in Savannah like they were the most important things he'd ever heard. "Tell me about your wife," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the boldness of the question. Jared's hand stilled on his wineglass, and for a moment Lily thought she'd crossed a line. But then he nodded, his expression growing soft with memory. "Maria," he said quietly. "I met her in college. She was studying art history, wanted to work in museums. She was gentle, kind, the sort of person who made everyone around her feel loved." "You must have loved her very much," Lily said, and realized she meant it. There was no jealousy in her voice, just genuine compassion for the pain she could see in his eyes. "I did," he agreed, "but it was a different kind of love than what I'm feeling now." Lily's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "Loving Maria was like a warm fire," he said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Comfortable, steady, the kind of thing you could rely on to always be there. What I feel when I look at you." He paused, searching for words. "It's like lightning, Lily, bright and dangerous and completely unpredictable." The echo of her own words from the night before hung between them, and Lily felt something shift in her chest, a door opening that she'd kept locked for years. "That scares you," she observed. "Terrifies me," he admitted. "Maria's death nearly destroyed me. I spent 5 years building walls around my heart, convincing myself that I was fine alone, and then you crashed into my life and made me realize that I haven't been living at all. I've just been existing." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tight. "Jared, I know this is crazy," he said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "I know we barely know each other, and I know I'm probably the worst possible choice for a woman who's been hurt by a wealthy man before. But I need you to know that when I look at you, I don't see someone I can buy or impress or add to my collection. I see the woman who's going to change my life." Lily stared at him across the candlelit table, seeing the vulnerability beneath the confidence, the man beneath the billionaire. "How can you be so sure?" "Because you already have," he said simply. 3 days ago I was sleepwalking through my life. Tonight I feel like I'm finally awake." The waiter came to clear their plates, but neither of them noticed. They were lost in each other, in the space between what was and what could be, in the electricity that crackled in the air around them like a living thing. "Would you like to see the terrace?" Jared asked finally, his voice rough with something that made heat pool low in her belly. Lily nodded, not trusting her voice. She followed him through the restaurant and up a narrow staircase to a rooftop garden that overlooked the twinkling lights of the city. Fairy lights were strung between the trees, and the air was warm with the promise of summer. It was the most romantic setting she'd ever seen, and when Jared turned to face her, the look in his eyes made her forget everything except the way her heart was racing. "Lily," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, his hands coming up to frame her face. "And I need you to know that once I do, there's no going back for me. You'll be in my blood, in my dreams, in every breath I take." "Jared," she breathed, but whatever she'd been about to say was lost as his lips covered hers. The kiss was everything she'd imagined, and nothing she could have prepared for. It started soft, almost reverent, but the moment she responded, the moment her lips parted under his and her hands fisted in his sweater, something ignited between them that felt like pure fire. His mouth moved over hers with a hunger that matched her own, and she could taste wine and want and the promise of everything she'd ever dreamed of but never dared to reach for. When his tongue swept against hers, she moaned into his mouth, and the sound seemed to drive him wild. "God, Lily!" he groaned against her lips, backing her against the brick wall of the building. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" "Show me," she whispered, and saw something fierce and possessive flare in his eyes. His mouth claimed hers again, harder this time, more demanding, and she met him kiss for kiss, touch for touch, need for need. His hands were in her hair, on her face, tracing the curve of her waist, and everywhere he touched felt like fire. She could feel the hard length of him pressed against her, could feel how much he wanted her, and the knowledge that she could affect him this way was intoxicating. "We should go," he said roughly, but he made no move to step away. "Where?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "My place," he said, his eyes searching her face. "But only if you want to, Lily. Only if you're sure." She looked into his storm-grey eyes, saw the want and the vulnerability, and the man who'd been alone for too long, and realized she'd never been more sure of anything in her life. "I want to," she said simply. The ride back to his penthouse was a study in restraint. They sat in the back of his car, hands clasped, stealing glances at each other like teenagers sneaking kisses behind the bleachers. But there was nothing teenage about the heat that radiated between them. Nothing innocent about the way Jared's thumb traced circles on her palm or the way Lily's breath caught every time he looked at her. His penthouse looked different in the evening light, softer, more intimate, like a sanctuary instead of a showpiece. He led her to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights, but all Lily could see was the man standing before her, looking at her like she was something precious and rare. "Are you sure?" he asked one more time, and she could hear the barely controlled need in his voice. Instead of answering with words, she reached up and kissed him, putting all her feelings into the contact of lips and tongue and breath. He responded immediately, his arms coming around her like he never wanted to let her go, and she realized that this moment, this man, this feeling, was what she'd been waiting for her entire life. When he lifted her in his arms and carried her to his bedroom, she felt like she was floating. When he laid her gently on his bed and looked down at her with eyes that burned with love and want and reverence, she felt like the most beautiful woman who'd ever lived. And when he made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes and a passion that set her soul on fire, she realized that everything she'd thought she knew about herself, about love, about what was possible, had been just a pale shadow of the truth. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through his windows, Jared traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder and whispered words of love and promises of forever that she wanted desperately to believe. "This changes everything," he said softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I know," she whispered back, and realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of change. She was afraid of losing this, losing him, losing the way he made her feel like she could conquer the world as long as he was beside her. But that fear was for tomorrow. Tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man who'd caught her when she fell and had been holding her ever since. Chapter 5. Love in the Spotlight. Love, Lily discovered, had a way of making even the most impossible dreams feel like destiny, until the moment the outside world decided to remind you exactly why some dreams were meant to stay impossible. She woke up in Jared's arms on what felt like the most perfect morning of her life, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse bedroom like a golden benediction. He was still sleeping, his dark hair tousled against the pillow, his strong features relaxed in a way they never were during his waking hours. In sleep, he looked younger, less like the formidable billionaire who commanded boardrooms and more like the man who'd held her tenderly through the night, whispering promises against her skin that made her believe in forever. "You're staring," he murmured without opening his eyes, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm admiring," she corrected, tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "There's a difference." He hummed, his arms tightening around her. "And what exactly are you admiring?" "The way you look when you're not trying to intimidate half of Manhattan," she said, pressing a soft kiss to his collarbone. "The way you sleep, like you trust the world not to hurt you while you're vulnerable." His eyes opened then, slate blue and intense as they focused on her face. "I trust you not to hurt me," he said quietly. "That's different." The simple honesty in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. 3 days. They'd been together for 3 days, and already she couldn't imagine her life without him in it. He'd rearranged his schedule to spend time with her, had dinner sent up to his penthouse every evening so they could eat together after her cleaning shifts, made love to her like she was something precious and rare. It was perfect. Too perfect. "I have to go," she said reluctantly, glancing at the clock on his nightstand. "I'm covering a shift at the coffee shop this morning, and then I have that catering gig tonight." Jared's expression darkened slightly. "Cancel it." "The catering gig?" Lily raised an eyebrow. "I can't just cancel, Jared. People are depending on me." "I'm depending on you too," he said, his hand sliding up to cup her face. "Stay with me today. Let me take you somewhere beautiful, show you how the other half lives." "I am the other half," she reminded him gently. "I can't just abandon my responsibilities because we're whatever this is." "What this is," he said firmly, "is the beginning of the rest of our lives. And I want to show you off, Lily. I want the whole world to know that you're mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have annoyed her, but instead it sent heat shooting through her veins. The way Jared looked at her, touched her, claimed her, it made her feel like the most desirable woman alive. But underneath the heady rush of being wanted so intensely, a small voice of caution whispered warnings she wasn't ready to hear. "The whole world?" she asked carefully. "Well, maybe we'll start with just the philanthropic elite of Manhattan," he said with a grin that was equal parts boyish charm and devastating sensuality. "There's a charity masquerade ball tonight. Very exclusive, very glamorous. I want you there with me." Lily's heart skipped. "Jared, I can't. I don't have anything appropriate to wear to something like that, and I've never—" "I'll take care of everything," he said, silencing her protests with a kiss that made her forget her own name. "Dress, shoes, jewelry, whatever you need. I want to dance with you under crystal chandeliers and show everyone in the room that I'm the luckiest man alive." The romantic picture he painted was tempting, but the practical part of her, the part that had learned to be cautious about gifts from wealthy men, was sending up red flags. "I can't let you buy me clothes, Jared. That's too much." "It's not enough," he said fiercely. "Nothing could be enough for what you've given me." Before she could argue further, his phone rang, the same sharp, insistent sound that had interrupted their dinner that first night. Jared ignored it, but when it rang again, he sighed and reached for it. "What?" he answered curtly, and Lily could see the exact moment when he shifted from lover to billionaire. "When? How did they—" "No, don't comment. I'll handle it." He hung up and ran a hand through his hair, his expression grim. "What's wrong?" Lily asked, sitting up and pulling the sheet around herself. "Nothing for you to worry about," he said, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw had tightened. "Jared." He looked at her then, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach clench with unease. "Someone took pictures," he said finally, "of us, at the restaurant the other night." Lily felt the blood drain from her face. "Pictures? They're calling you my mystery woman," he said, reaching for his phone and showing her the screen. "Look, it's not that bad." But Lily was staring at the gossip blog headline with growing horror. "Billionaire bachelor Jared Orton spotted with mystery brunette, new love or another fling." The photos were grainy but clear enough. Jared's hands in her hair as he kissed her on the restaurant terrace, the two of them gazing at each other over dinner with obvious intimacy. She looked beautiful in the pictures, radiant with happiness, But all she could think about was her grandmother seeing these, her co-workers, everyone she knew discovering that she was involved with one of the most powerful men in the city. "This is bad," she whispered. "It's just gossip," Jared said firmly. "It'll blow over in a few days. These people always move on to the next story." But even as he said it, his phone was ringing again and again. And when he finally answered, Lily could hear the sharp feminine voice on the other end, even from across the room. "Jared, darling, what is this nonsense I'm reading online? Who is this woman, and why are you making such a spectacle of yourself?" Jared's expression went carefully blank. "Hello, Celeste." Celeste. Even though Lily had never met Jared's former sister-in-law, she'd heard enough to know that Celeste Beaumont was everything Lily wasn't. Old money, perfectly polished, the kind of woman who belonged in Jared's world. "Don't hello Celeste me," the voice continued, sharp with displeasure. "The Worthington charity ball is tonight, and I've already told everyone I'm attending as your guest. You cannot possibly be planning to bring some random woman instead of me." Lily watched Jared's face carefully, saw the exact moment when he made his decision. His jaw set, his eyes hardened, and when he spoke, his voice carried all the authority of a man who owned half of Manhattan. "Celeste, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. I will be attending tonight's ball with Lily Morris, the woman I'm in love with. She's not random, she's not temporary, and she's not up for discussion. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to find other plans for the evening." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, "You can't be serious. Jared, think about what you're doing. Think about Maria. She would want you to be with someone suitable, someone who understands your world." "Maria would want me to be happy," Jared said quietly, but there was steel underneath the calm. "And Lily makes me happier than I've been in 5 years. He hung up without waiting for a response, but Lily could see the tension radiating through his body. When he turned back to her, his expression was apologetic but determined. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said. "Celeste has trouble accepting that the world doesn't revolve around her wishes." "She's not wrong, though," Lily said quietly. "I don't understand your world, Jared. I don't belong at charity balls with Manhattan's elite. I'll embarrass you." "Never," he said fiercely, crossing to the bed and taking her hands in his. "You could never embarrass me, Lily. You're brilliant and beautiful and everything I never knew I was looking for." "But I'm not suitable," she said, echoing Celeste's words. "I work 3 jobs, Jared. I shop at thrift stores and eat ramen for dinner more nights than I care to admit. These people are going to take one look at me and know I don't belong. Then we'll show them that belonging isn't about money or bloodlines," he said, his thumbs tracing circles on her hands. "We'll show them that love matters more than any of that superficial bullshit." His conviction was intoxicating, but Lily had learned the hard way that love didn't always conquer all. Still, looking into his storm-grey eyes, seeing the determination and devotion there, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she whispered. "One charity ball." His smile was brilliant. "One charity ball," he agreed, though they both knew it was about so much more than that. 6 hours later, Lily stood in front of her bathroom mirror, wearing a dress that cost more than her rent and feeling like she was about to walk into battle. The personal shopper Jared had sent, an elegant woman named Isabella Romano, had transformed her into someone she barely recognized. The midnight blue gown hugged her curves perfectly, the jewelry sparkled like stars against her dark skin, and her hair had been swept into an elegant updo that made her look sophisticated and worldly. She looked beautiful, she looked expensive, she looked like she belonged in Jared's world, but underneath all the silk and diamonds, she was still just Lily Morris from Savannah, and she had a sinking feeling that everyone at the ball would see right through the designer facade. "You look incredible," Amara breathed from the doorway, "like a princess. No, like a queen." "I look like I'm playing dress-up," Lily said, adjusting the diamond necklace that probably cost more than her car. You look like a woman in love, Amara corrected gently, and there's nothing more beautiful than that. The limousine, because of course Jared had sent a limousine, arrived precisely on time, and when Lily stepped inside, she found him waiting for her in a tuxedo that made her forget how to breathe. He looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a magazine, all sharp lines and masculine elegance, but when he saw her, his expression went soft, with something that looked like worship. "You're stunning," he said simply, and the raw honesty in his voice made her believe it. The Worthington Charity Ball was being held at the Metropolitan Museum, and as their car pulled up to the red carpet entrance, Lily felt her stomach clench with nerves. Photographers lined the steps, flashbulbs popping like strobe lights, and she could see the carefully orchestrated chaos of Manhattan high society in all its glory. "I can't do this," she said suddenly, her hand gripping Jared's arm. "Yes, you can," he said firmly, covering her hand with his. "Just remember, you're not here as my charity case or my temporary distraction. You're here as the woman I love, the woman who's changed my entire life. Hold your head high and let them see what I see when I look at you." The moment they stepped out of the car, the cameras went wild. Lily heard people calling Jared's name, saw the flash of photographers capturing every moment, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing her, judging her, finding her wanting. But Jared's hand was warm and steady on her back, and when she looked at him, he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. "Mr. Orton, who's your date?" someone called out. "Lily Morris," Jared said clearly, his voice carrying across the chaos. "The most beautiful woman in New York." Inside the museum, the party was everything Lily had imagined and more. Crystal chandeliers cast sparkling light over elegantly dressed guests who moved through the galleries with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to worry about money. The women wore gowns that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and the men commanded space with the easy authority of people who owned the world. And they were all staring at her. "Jared, darling," a voice called out, and Lily turned to see a woman approaching them with predatory grace. She was beautiful in the way that money could buy. Perfectly sculpted features, platinum blonde hair swept into an intricate chignon, wearing a white gown that probably cost more than Lily's car. Everything about her screamed old money and social position. Celeste Beaumont. It had to be. "Celeste," Jared said coolly, his arm tightening protectively around Lily's waist. "And you must be the mysterious Lily," Celeste said, her smile sharp as a blade as she looked Lily up and down with obvious assessment. "How charming. I love what you've done with yourself. Very pretty woman." The insult was delivered with such perfect society sweetness that for a moment Lily almost missed it. Almost. But the reference to the movie about a prostitute was unmistakable, and she felt heat flood her cheeks. "Celeste." Jared's voice was dangerous, a warning that made several nearby guests turn to look. "Oh, don't be so sensitive, darling," Celeste said with a laugh like breaking glass. "I'm sure Ms. Morris knows exactly what she is. After all, she must be quite talented to have captured your attention so completely." The words hit Lily like physical blows, each one designed to make her feel small, cheap, out of place. And they were working. She could feel the curious stares of the other guests, could hear the whispered conversations that stopped when she walked by, could see the way some of the women looked at her like she was an interesting species of insect. "If you'll excuse us," Jared said coldly, guiding Lily away from Celeste's venomous smile. But the damage was done. For the rest of the evening, Lily felt like she was walking through a minefield. Every conversation was laced with subtle digs about her background. Every compliment felt backhanded. Every smile seemed to hide cruel judgment. When Jared introduced her to people, she could see them trying to place her, to figure out which family she belonged to, which social circle had produced her. And when they couldn't, she could see the exact moment when they wrote her off as irrelevant. "You're doing beautifully," Jared whispered in her ear as they swayed together on the dance floor. But Lily could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept tracking the room like he was expecting an attack. "No, I'm not," she said quietly. "I'm exactly what they think I am, a fish out of water who doesn't belong here." "You belong wherever I am," he said fiercely, spinning her in a move that drew appreciative murmurs from the watching crowd. But even as he said it, Lily could see Celeste watching them from across the room, her pale eyes calculating and cold. And she could see the photographers at the edge of the ballroom, capturing every moment for tomorrow's gossip pages. By the time they left the ball, Lily felt emotionally bruised and exhausted. The limousine ride back to Jared's penthouse was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts about the evening's events. "That wasn't so bad," Jared said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "Wasn't it?" Lily looked at him, seeing the man she loved, but also seeing the vast gulf that separated their worlds. "Did you see the way they looked at me, Jared? The way they talked to me? I'm not stupid. I know what they think." "I don't care what they think," he said fiercely. "But I do," she admitted quietly. "And so do you, whether you want to admit it or not." They rode the rest of the way in silence, both of them knowing that something had shifted between them that night. The fairy tale was starting to show its cracks, and the real world was seeping in like water through a damaged hull. When they reached his penthouse, Jared's phone was buzzing with notifications, messages, emails, calls from reporters wanting statements. The gossip blogs were already posting pictures from the ball, and Lily could see the headlines forming. "Orton's mystery woman revealed" and "Billionaire's new toy." "This is just the beginning," she said quietly, looking at the screen. "It'll pass," Jared said, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. As they stood in his living room, still dressed in their beautiful clothes, but feeling the weight of the world pressing down on them, Lily realized that loving Jared Orton was going to be the hardest thing she'd ever done. But looking at him, seeing the vulnerability beneath the confidence, feeling the way her heart raced just from being near him, she knew it would also be the most worthwhile. The question was whether their love would be strong enough to survive the storm that was coming. Chapter 6. Shattered Hearts. Love, Lily learned too late, could be destroyed by the very people who claimed to protect it. And sometimes the most devastating betrayal came wrapped in good intentions and delivered by the person you trusted most. The morning after the charity ball dawned grey and cold, matching the dread that had settled in Lily's chest like a stone. She woke alone in Jared's massive bed, the space beside her already cool, and knew before she even looked at her phone that their fairy tale was about to become a nightmare. The headlines were everywhere: Orton's gold digger exposed, and Billionaire's cleaning lady romance, and, most cruelly, from rags to riches, the Cinderella con. The photos from the ball made her look calculating and predatory, as if she'd somehow orchestrated their entire relationship for financial gain. But it was the quote attributed to an anonymous source close to the family that made her stomach clench with nausea. Jared's always been vulnerable to women who need rescuing. This girl is obviously using his guilt over Maria's death to manipulate him. It's tragic, really, Celeste. It had to be Celeste. Lily found Jared in his home office, still wearing his tuxedo shirt from the night before, staring at his computer screen with an expression of such fury that she almost turned around and left. But then he looked up and saw her, and his face immediately softened. "You're awake," he said, rising from his chair and moving toward her. "I was hoping you'd sleep in. This will all blow over, I promise." "Will it?" Lily held up her phone, showing him the headlines. "Because it looks like it's just getting started." Jared's jaw tightened as he read, and she could see the moment when the full scope of the media assault registered. "This is Celeste's doing," he said grimly. "She's turned you into a target because she can't accept that I've moved on." "Maybe she has a point," Lily said quietly. "What?" Jared's head snapped up, his storm-grey eyes fierce. "Don't you dare let her poison get into your head, Lily. She's just jealous and vindictive." "Is she?" Lily moved to the window, looking out at the city that suddenly felt hostile and unwelcoming. "Look at this objectively, Jared. A billionaire starts dating his cleaning lady after knowing her for less than a week. How does that look to the outside world?" "I don't care how it looks," he said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I care about how it feels, and this feels like the most real thing in my life." For a moment, Lily let herself melt into his embrace, let herself believe that love really could conquer all. But then his phone rang, sharp and insistent, and she felt him tense behind her. "Don't answer it," she said. "I have to," he replied, already reaching for the device. "It might be important." It was Sebastian, and even though Jared tried to keep his voice low, Lily could hear the urgency in his best friend's tone. Something about board meetings and investor concerns and damage control. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes, but when Jared hung up, she could see the weight of the world settling on his shoulders. "What?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "The board is meeting this afternoon," he said, running a hand through his dark hair. "Some of the investors are concerned about the negative publicity. They think it reflects poorly on the company's image." "And what did you tell Sebastian?" "That my personal life is none of their business," Jared said firmly, but she could hear the uncertainty underneath the bravado. Over the next few hours, the situation only got worse. Photographers camped outside Jared's building and Lily's apartment. Her grandmother called, confused and frightened by reporters showing up at her door. Amara texted that she'd been approached by tabloid journalists offering money for stories about Lily's real background. By afternoon, Jared was fielding calls every few minutes from his lawyers, his publicist, his business partners, all urging damage control. And with each call, Lily could see him pulling further away from her and deeper into the world that demanded he choose between love and everything he'd built. "Maybe I should go home for a while," she said finally, as he hung up from yet another crisis management meeting. "Let things cool down." "No," Jared said immediately, reaching for her. "That's exactly what they want. If you disappear now, it'll look like you were using me and ran when things got complicated." "But what if I was?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she saw something flicker in his eyes that looked like doubt. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe they're right, Jared. Maybe I am just a poor girl who got swept away by your money and your world. Maybe this whole thing is just a fantasy that was never going to work." "Don't say that," he said fiercely, gripping her shoulders. "Don't let them make you doubt what we have." But it was too late. The doubt was already there, poisoning everything she thought she knew about their relationship. Had she fallen in love with Jared the man, or with the security and luxury he represented? Was she really any different from the gold diggers the media was painting her as? The final blow came that evening when Jared's phone rang and she saw Maria's parents' names on the screen. She watched his face as he answered, saw the way his expression went carefully blank as they spoke. The conversation was short, but when he hung up, she could see that something fundamental had changed. "What did they say?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "They're concerned," he said carefully, "about Maria's memory being tarnished by association with scandal. They think it would be best if I took some time to reconsider my choices." "And what do you think?" Lily asked, her heart already breaking because she could see the answer in his eyes. "I think—" Jared stopped, ran his hands through his hair, paced to the window and back. "I think maybe everyone's right. Maybe I moved too fast, got too caught up in feelings I wasn't ready for. Maybe I put you in an impossible position." Each word hit her like a physical blow, but she forced herself to stand straight, to keep her voice steady. What are you saying, Jared? I'm saying maybe we need to step back, take some time apart while things calm down. Let the media find a new story to obsess over. Step back, she repeated numbly. For how long? I don't know, he admitted, and the uncertainty in his voice was worse than outright rejection would have been. A few weeks? A month? However long it takes for this to blow over. Lily stared at him, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with disappearing before her eyes, replaced by the cold, calculating billionaire who made decisions based on public perception and business concerns rather than matters of the heart. I see, she said quietly. So when things get difficult, when your world pushes back against our relationship, you want to hide me away until it's convenient to love me again. That's not what I'm saying. That's exactly what you're saying, she interrupted, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. You're saying that I'm not worth fighting for, that your reputation and your business and your dead wife's memory are all more important than what we have together. Lily, please, he said, reaching for her, but she stepped back. No, she said firmly. Don't touch me. Don't make this harder than it already is. She could see the pain in his eyes, could see that this was tearing him apart too, but it didn't matter. He was choosing to let her go, choosing to prioritize everything else over their love, and that choice revealed everything she needed to know about where she really stood in his life. I need you to know, she said, gathering what was left of her dignity around her like armor, that what we had was real, at least for me. I didn't fall in love with your money or your status or what you could do for me. I fell in love with the man who cooked me dinner and held me during thunderstorms and looked at me like I was something precious. You are precious, he said desperately. Lily, you're everything to me. No, she said, moving toward the door. If I were everything to you, you'd fight for me. You'd tell your board and your investors and Maria's parents and the whole damn world that love matters more than their approval. But you're not going to do that, are you? The silence that followed was answer enough. I'll send someone for my things, she said, her hand on the doorknob. Don't contact me again, Jared. When you're ready to choose love over fear, you know where to find me. But I won't be your secret shame or your temporary inconvenience. She walked out of his penthouse with her head held high. But by the time she reached the lobby, tears were streaming down her face. Outside, the photographers were still waiting, and their cameras flashed like lightning as she emerged onto the street. Miss Morris, any comment on your breakup? How much did Orton pay you to disappear? Was it all about the money? Lily ignored them all, hailed a cab, and disappeared into the night, leaving behind the man who had shown her what love could feel like, and then taught her exactly how much it hurt when that love wasn't strong enough to overcome the world's cruelty. In his penthouse, Jared stood at the window watching her taxi disappear into traffic and realized he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. But by then, it was too late to take it back. The woman who had brought light into his dark world was gone, and he had no one to blame but himself. Chapter 7. Hearts in Exile. Some wounds, Lily discovered, were too deep for time to heal. They just learned to bleed more quietly, a constant ache that colored every breath until you forgot what it felt like to live without pain. 4 months. 4 months since she'd walked out of Jared's penthouse and out of his life, and still she woke every morning with his name on her lips and his phantom touch burning her skin. She'd thrown herself into work with the desperate intensity of someone trying to outrun her own heartbreak, taking on extra shifts, building her catering business with single-minded determination, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. It wasn't working. You're going to burn yourself out, Amara said, watching Lily meticulously pipe frosting onto wedding cupcakes at 2 a.m. Their tiny apartment had been transformed into a makeshift bakery, every surface covered with mixing bowls and piping bags, and the detritus of a business born from desperation. "I'm fine," Lily replied automatically, the same lie she'd been telling herself and everyone else for months. Mrs. Henderson's daughter deserves perfect cupcakes for her wedding. Mrs. Henderson's daughter deserves cupcakes made by someone who isn't slowly dying of heartbreak, Amara said gently. "Honey, when's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? When's the last time you ate an actual meal instead of just surviving on coffee and stubbornness?" Lily's hands stilled on the piping bag. The truth was, she couldn't remember. Ever since leaving Jared, she'd been running on autopilot, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Food had no taste. Sleep brought dreams that tormented her, and every morning felt like an uphill battle just to get out of bed. "I'm building something," she said finally. "The catering business is taking off. I'm booked solid for the next 2 months." "And that's wonderful," Amara said, sitting down across from her. "But success won't fill the hole in your heart, Lily. And you can't keep pretending that you're not dying inside." Lily set down the piping bag and finally looked at her best friend, really looked at her. Amara's dark eyes were full of concern and love and the kind of understanding that came from knowing someone's soul. They'd been friends since college, had weathered every storm together, and if anyone could see through Lily's carefully constructed facade, it was Amara. "What am I supposed to do?" Lily whispered, and for the first time in months, she let her true feelings show. "I'm in love with a man who chose everything else over me, who let me walk away because it was easier than fighting for what we had." "Have you considered that maybe he's suffering too?" Amara asked gently. "Good," Lily said, but there was no heat behind it, just exhaustion. "I hope he is. I hope he misses me every day and regrets letting me go." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. She didn't want Jared to suffer. She wanted him to be happy, even if that happiness didn't include her. She wanted him to find peace, even if the knowledge that he could live without her was slowly killing her. "The gossip blogs say he's been a hermit," Amara said carefully. "No public appearances, no dates, no social events. Sebastian Sterling told Entertainment Tonight that Jared's been focusing on work and personal reflection." Lily's heart clenched at the mention of his name, but she forced herself to stay focused on the cupcakes. "That's not my problem anymore." "Isn't it?" Amara challenged. "You're both miserable, Lily. You're both in love with each other. Maybe it's time to stop being stubborn and—" "And what?" Lily snapped, her carefully controlled emotions finally breaking free. "Go crawling back to him? Beg him to love me enough to actually fight for me? I have some pride left, Amara. Not much, but some." Amara reached across the table and took her hands, stilling their trembling. "I'm not saying crawl back to him. I'm saying maybe it's time to forgive him. And maybe it's time to forgive yourself." "For what?" "For falling in love with someone whose world was too different from yours. For wanting more than you thought you deserved. For being human enough to get your heart broken." The words hit too close to home, and Lily felt tears pricking at her eyes for the first time in weeks. She'd been so angry for so long, angry at Jared, angry at his world, angry at herself for being naive enough to believe in fairy tales that she'd forgotten how to feel anything else. "I miss him," she admitted quietly, the words scraped raw from her throat. "I miss him so much I can barely breathe sometimes. I miss the way he looked at me, the way he held me, the way he made me feel like I was the most important person in the world." "Then maybe—" "But missing him doesn't change what happened," Lily continued, her voice growing stronger. "It doesn't change the fact that when push came to shove, he chose his reputation over our love. It doesn't change the fact that he was willing to throw away what we had the moment it became inconvenient." Across the city, in a penthouse that had become more mausoleum than home, Jared Orton was discovering that success meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. "You look terrible," Sebastian said bluntly, setting a cup of coffee on Jared's desk and taking in his best friend's appearance with obvious concern. Jared's usually impeccable grooming had given way to wrinkled shirts and shadowed cheeks, and his eyes held the hollow look of a man who'd forgotten how to sleep. "I feel worse than terrible," Jared replied, not bothering to look up from the business reports that had been sitting unread on his desk for hours. The quarterly numbers meant nothing when every achievement felt empty, when every success was just another reminder of what he'd thrown away. "The board meeting went well," Sebastian offered. "The investors are pleased with third-quarter projections. Wonderful for them." "Jared," Sebastian's voice carried the weight of decades of friendship. "This self-destruction has to stop. You can't keep punishing yourself like this." "Can't I?" Jared finally looked up, and Sebastian was shocked by the devastation he saw in his friend's expression. "I destroyed the most precious thing I've ever found, Sebastian. I had a woman who loved me for who I am, not what I own, and I threw her away like she was disposable. You were trying to protect her. I was protecting myself," Jared interrupted bitterly. "I was so terrified of being vulnerable again, so afraid of risking my carefully controlled world, that I convinced myself I was being noble. But the truth is, I was just a coward, too scared to fight for love, too weak to choose her over everyone else's expectations." "So why don't you fight for her now?" Sebastian asked. "Go to her. Tell her you made a mistake. Tell her you love her." Jared laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And say what? Sorry I abandoned you when you needed me most, but I've realized I can't live without you. She deserves better than that, Sebastian. She deserves better than me." "Doesn't she deserve the choice?" The question hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Jared allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to see Lily again. To look into her beautiful dark eyes and tell her that not a day had passed without him thinking of her, without him regretting his choices, without him wishing he could go back and be the man she deserved from the beginning. But then he remembered the look on her face when she'd walked out of his apartment, hurt and disappointed and utterly done with him, and he knew that ship had sailed. "She made her choice when she left," he said quietly. "I have to respect that, even if it's killing you both." Jared didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. He was dying without her. Had been dying slowly for 4 months, going through the motions of living while feeling like a ghost of himself. But loving someone sometimes meant letting them go, even when it destroyed you in the process. That night, as Lily finally fell into an exhausted sleep surrounded by wedding cupcakes and dreams of what might have been, Jared stood at his penthouse window, looking out at the city lights and wondering if she was somewhere out there thinking of him too. Neither of them knew that fate was already conspiring to bring them back together, that circumstances beyond their control were about to test whether love really could conquer the pride and fear that had torn them apart. But they would find out soon enough. Because some love stories are too powerful to end with goodbye, no matter how final that goodbye feels at the time. Chapter 8. Fate Intervenes. Sometimes the universe has to break your heart twice before it can put it back together, and sometimes the second breaking is what finally teaches you that love is worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, shattering Lily's restless sleep like glass. She fumbled for her phone, heart already racing with the premonition that only came with calls at ungodly hours. Someone was hurt. Someone was dying. Someone needed her right now. "Lily?" Marcus's voice was tight with fear and exhaustion. "It's Granny. She's in the hospital." The world tilted sideways. Lily sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake despite having fallen asleep less than 2 hours earlier. "What happened?" "Heart attack," Marcus said, and she could hear him struggling to hold himself together. She was gardening this afternoon, felt dizzy and short of breath. Mrs. Rodriguez found her collapsed on the porch around evening. The paramedics said she'd been down for maybe 20 minutes before they got her heart beating steady again. She's been in surgery for 8 hours now. Lily was already moving, throwing clothes into a bag with shaking hands. What do the doctors say? They're not sure yet. The damage is extensive, and at her age... Marcus's voice broke. Lily, you need to come home. The surgeon says the next 48 hours will determine everything. I'm on my way, she said, her voice steadier than her hands. I'll catch the first flight to Savannah. There's more, Marcus said quietly. The surgery, it's expensive. Even with her Medicare, the cardiac surgeon is talking about procedures that could cost hundreds of thousands. The insurance company is already talking about what they won't cover. Lily's stomach dropped. She'd been sending money home every month, but her catering business was still new, still building. She had maybe 10,000 in savings, a drop in the bucket compared to what they were facing. We'll figure it out, she said, though she had no idea how. Family first. Always. We'll find a way. 6 hours later, she was on a plane to Savannah, her eyes red from tears and exhaustion, her phone buzzing with medical bills and insurance forms and the crushing weight of responsibility. Esperanza Morris had raised her and Marcus after their parents died, had given them love and stability and everything she had. Now it was Lily's turn to take care of her, no matter what it cost. The cardiac unit at Memorial University Medical Center was a symphony of beeping machines and hushed conversations, the kind of place where hope and despair walked hand in hand down sterile corridors. Lily found Marcus in the waiting room, looking older than his 28 years, his usually immaculate appearance rumpled from spending the night in a hospital chair. "How is she?" Lily asked, sinking into the chair beside him. "Stable, but critical," Marcus said, rubbing his eyes. "The surgeon says the next 48 hours are crucial. If she makes it through that, then we can start talking about long-term care. Can I see her? Family only, 2 at a time, 5 minutes every hour." Marcus managed a weak smile. "I've been telling them you're practically a doctor with all your medical knowledge from taking care of her." Lily squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his presence. They'd always been a team, she and Marcus, united in their determination to honor the woman who'd saved them both. Whatever it took, they'd find a way through this. That afternoon, while Esperanza slept under a maze of tubes and monitors, Lily met with Dr. Sophia Hassan, the cardiac surgeon who'd operated on her grandmother. Dr. Hassan was an elegant woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and gentle hands, but when she explained the extent of Esperanza's condition, her words were brutally honest. "The damage to her heart is severe," Dr. Hassan said, showing Lily the scans that might as well have been written in a foreign language. "We've done what we can surgically, but she's going to need ongoing care, medications, possible additional procedures. The best-case scenario is that she'll need a cardiac rehabilitation program, daily monitoring, a completely supervised care environment." "What are we talking about financially?" Lily asked, dreading the answer. "With insurance, you're looking at probably 200,000 over the next year minimum. Without insurance..." Dr. Hassan's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "Much more." The number hit Lily like a physical blow. $200,000. She could cater every wedding in Georgia for the next 5 years and still not have that kind of money. And that was just the beginning. If Esperanza needed additional surgery, if complications arose, the costs could skyrocket even higher. "I need to make some calls," Lily said, her mind already racing through possibilities. She could sell everything she owned, take out loans, mortgage her future against her grandmother's health. Whatever it took. That evening, as she sat beside Esperanza's bed, holding her grandmother's hand and watching her chest rise and fall with mechanical precision, Lily felt more alone than she ever had in her life. Marcus was handling the insurance paperwork, but they both knew it wouldn't be enough. She needed a miracle, and miracles didn't come to girls like her. Her phone rang softly, and she glanced at the screen before answering. "Amara." Honey, I heard about your grandmother. Amara's voice was warm with concern. How is she? Not good, Lily said quietly, stepping into the hallway so she wouldn't disturb the other patients. The surgery went well, but the long-term care is going to be expensive. How expensive? Lily told her, and heard Amara's sharp intake of breath. Oh, sweetie, what are you going to do? I don't know, Lily admitted. Sell my business, probably. Take out every loan I can qualify for. Figure out how to make it work, because that's what family does. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Amara spoke again, her voice was careful. Lily, I need to tell you something. About Jared. Lily's heart clenched at the mention of his name. I don't want to hear about him right now, Amara. I can't handle... He's been asking about you, Amara interrupted. Sebastian called me last week. Jared wanted to know if you were okay, if you were happy, if there was anything you needed. Well, you can tell Sebastian to tell Jared that I'm fine, Lily said, though they both knew it was a lie. What if he could help? Amara asked gently. No. The word came out sharper than Lily intended. Absolutely not. I won't take his charity, Amara. I won't become the poor girl he throws money at to assuage his conscience. But if it could save your grandmother... No, Lily repeated firmly. I'll find another way. But even as she said it, she knew that other ways might not exist, and as she hung up the phone and returned to her grandmother's bedside, she felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her chest like a physical presence. What she didn't know was that 800 miles away in Manhattan, a different kind of conversation was already taking place. Jared, it's Sebastian. I have news about a situation that requires discretion. Jared had been staring out his office window, lost in the same thoughts that had consumed him for months, when Sebastian's carefully neutral tone caught his attention. In their years of friendship, Sebastian only used that particular inflection when discussing matters that needed to stay off the record. What kind of situation? Jared asked, though something in his chest was already tightening with inexplicable concern. A family in Savannah. Elderly woman, heart attack, critical condition. The medical costs are substantial, beyond what insurance will cover. Sebastian paused meaningfully. The family name is Morris. The world stopped. Jared's hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. Esperanza Morris? You know her. She's... Jared's voice caught. She's Lily's grandmother. The woman who raised her. I see. Sebastian's tone remained carefully neutral, but Jared could hear the understanding beneath it. The family is facing impossible choices, the kind that destroy people. The words hit Jared like a lightning bolt. Esperanza Morris, the woman who'd raised Lily, who'd given her love and strength and everything good in her character. He remembered the stories Lily had told him about her grandmother, the warmth in her voice when she spoke of the woman who'd saved her and Marcus after their parents died. How much? He asked without hesitation. Jared? How much, Sebastian? Probably 200,000 minimum, maybe more. Done, Jared said immediately. Transfer whatever they need to the hospital. Make sure they have the best cardiac surgeon in the country. Private rooms, whatever it takes. She won't accept it if she knows it's from you, Sebastian warned. Then make sure she doesn't know, Jared said firmly. Set up an anonymous donor fund. Make it look like insurance coverage, I don't care. Just make sure that woman gets the care she needs. But even as he gave the orders, even as he arranged for Dr. Elena Rodriguez, one of the country's top cardiac specialists, to fly to Savannah, Jared knew this was about more than just medical bills. This was his chance to do something for the woman who'd shaped Lily into the incredible person she was. This was his chance to protect what was most precious to her, even if she never knew he was the one doing it. And maybe, if he was very lucky, it was his chance to prove that love wasn't just about grand gestures and passionate declarations. Sometimes love was about showing up when someone needed you most, even if they never knew you were there. Especially then. Chapter 9. Fighting for Forever. The moment you realize that pride is a cold companion compared to love is the moment you understand what it truly means to fight for someone, not just with grand gestures but with the kind of quiet, persistent devotion that says, "I choose you every day, no matter what it costs me." Lily knew something was wrong the moment Dr. Hassan walked into the family conference room, wearing an expression of barely contained excitement instead of the carefully neutral professionalism she'd come to expect from medical staff. It had been 3 days since Esperanza's surgery, 3 days of watching monitors and praying to whatever gods might be listening, 3 days of trying to figure out how to pay for a miracle. "Ms. Morris," Dr. Hassan said, settling into her chair with what looked suspiciously like a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, "I have some rather extraordinary news." Lily's stomach clenched. In her experience, extraordinary news in hospitals was rarely the good kind. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "Your grandmother is doing beautifully," Dr. Hassan assured her quickly. "Better than we dared hope, actually. Her heart is responding well to the medication and her recovery is ahead of schedule. But that's not the extraordinary part." Marcus leaned forward, his hand finding Lily's. "What is it, Doc?" "It seems your family has a guardian angel," Dr. Hassan said, her smile now fully visible. "We've received word that all of Mrs. Morris's medical expenses, the surgery, the ongoing care, the rehabilitation, everything, have been covered by an anonymous donor." The words didn't compute. Lily stared at the doctor, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "An anonymous donor has established a medical fund specifically for your grandmother's care," Dr. Hassan repeated. "Not just for this hospitalization, but for all future cardiac-related treatments, physical therapy, medications, follow-up procedures, home nursing care, everything she needs to make a full recovery." Lily felt the world tilt sideways. That's impossible. Who would do something like that?" "That's the anonymous part," Dr. Hassan said gently. "The donor specifically requested that their identity remain confidential. All I can tell you is that the fund has been fully funded and verified through the hospital's financial department." "How much money are we talking about?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "Enough to ensure your grandmother receives the absolute best care available for the rest of her life," Dr. Hassan said. "This donor has essentially removed all financial barriers to her recovery." Lily sat in stunned silence, her mind racing through possibilities. Who could afford something like this? Who would want to help her family without seeking recognition or gratitude? The answer that kept circling in her head was one she didn't want to acknowledge, because acknowledging it would mean facing feelings she'd spent months trying to bury. "I need some air," she said suddenly, standing so quickly that her chair scraped against the floor. I'll be right back." She fled the conference room and found herself in the hospital's small garden, a pocket of green in the middle of all the sterile efficiency. Her phone was in her hand before she'd consciously decided to make the call, her fingers moving with muscle memory as she dialed a number she knew by heart but hadn't used in 4 months. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Sebastian Sterling." "It's Lily," she said without preamble. "We need to talk." There was a pause, and when Sebastian spoke again, his voice was careful. "Lily, how's your grandmother?" "Cut the crap, Sebastian," she said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "I know it was him. I know Jared paid for everything." Another pause, longer this time. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Lily said, pacing across the small garden like a caged animal. "Anonymous donor, really? How many people do you know who have enough money to cover hundreds of thousands in medical bills and who would care enough about my grandmother to do it?" "Lily, where is he?" she demanded. I know he's in Savannah. Don't even try to tell me he arranged all this from New York." The silence stretched so long that Lily thought Sebastian might have hung up. Then, "He's staying at the Bohemian Hotel, room 412. But Lily, he doesn't know I'm telling you this." "Good," she said grimly. "I want the element of surprise." The Bohemian Hotel was exactly the kind of place Jared would choose. Elegant, expensive, discreet. Lily marched through the marble lobby like a woman on a mission, ignoring the curious stares of other guests as she bypassed the elevators and took the stairs two at a time. By the time she reached the fourth floor, her heart was pounding with a combination of exertion and fury and something else she didn't want to name. She pounded on the door of room 412 with enough force to wake the dead. "Jared!" she called out. "I know you're in there. Open the door." Footsteps, a pause, then the sound of locks being turned. When the door opened, Lily felt her breath catch despite her anger. 4 months apart had done nothing to diminish Jared's devastating appeal. If anything, he looked even more handsome, though there were new lines around his storm-grey eyes and a tiredness in his posture that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult choices. "Lily," he said quietly, and the way he said her name made her want to forget why she was angry and fall into his arms instead. "You son of a bitch," she said, pushing past him into the suite. "How dare you?" Jared closed the door and turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "How dare I what?" "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped, spinning to face him with fire in her eyes. "The anonymous donor, the medical fund. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" "I hoped you wouldn't," he admitted, and the quiet honesty in his voice took some of the wind out of her sails. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you do this? We're not together anymore, Jared. You made that perfectly clear when you let me walk away." "Because I love you," he said simply, and the words hit her like a physical blow. "Because your grandmother is the most important person in your world, and I couldn't stand the thought of you losing her because of money, because sometimes love means doing what's right, even when there's nothing in it for you." Lily stared at him, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with beneath the careful businessman's facade. "You think you can just throw money at the problem and make everything okay? You think you can buy your way back into my good graces?" "No," Jared said, moving closer but not touching her. "I think I can show you that I've learned something about what really matters. I think I can prove that love isn't about protecting yourself from getting hurt. It's about being willing to get hurt if it means keeping the people you love safe." "Pretty words," Lily said, but her voice lacked conviction. "But words are easy, Jared. It's actions that matter." "Then let me tell you about my actions," he said, his eyes never leaving her face. "I've spent the last 4 months realizing what an idiot I was. I've thought about you every single day, dreamed about you every night, and wished I could go back and be the man you deserved from the beginning." "Jared, I'm not finished," he said firmly. "When Sebastian told me about your grandmother, I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You show up when they need you, even if they don't want you there. Even if they'll never know you were there." Lily felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. "It doesn't change what happened between us. It doesn't change the fact that you chose your reputation over our love." "You're right," he said, and the admission surprised her. "I did choose wrong. I was scared and stupid, and I let other people's opinions matter more than the only opinion that should have counted, yours. But I'm not that man anymore, Lily. The man I am now would burn down the whole damn world before he'd let anything hurt you." "Prove it," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Jared's eyes flashed with something that looked like hope. "How?" Lily looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the billionaire who'd broken her heart, but the man who'd cooked dinner for her and held her during thunderstorms and loved her like she was something precious. the man who'd secretly flown 800 miles to make sure her grandmother got the care she needed, even though he had no guarantee that she'd ever forgive him. "Start by telling me the truth," she said quietly. "All of it. Why you're really here, what you want from me, what you're prepared to do if I can never trust you again." Jared took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 4 months of regret and longing and love that had never dimmed despite everything that had gone wrong between them. "I'm here because I can't live without you," he said. "I want another chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved, fearlessly, completely, without reservation. And if you can never trust me again, if you can never forgive me for being such a coward." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never need anything, even if I can never be the one to give it to you directly." The absolute honesty in his words broke something open in Lily's chest, all the anger and hurt and carefully constructed walls crumbling in the face of a love that had traveled 800 miles just to make sure she didn't have to face her worst nightmare alone. "Jared," she whispered, and this time when the tears came, she didn't try to stop them. "I love you, Lily Morris," he said, stepping closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I love your strength and your stubborn pride, and the way you make me want to be better than I am. I love you enough to fight for you this time, even if the whole world thinks I'm crazy." "The whole world probably does think you're crazy," she said through her tears. "Good," he said fiercely. "Let them think whatever they want. The only opinion that matters to me is yours." And standing there in that hotel room, looking into the storm-grey eyes of the man who'd secretly saved her grandmother's life without asking for anything in return, Lily realized that sometimes love really could learn from its mistakes. Sometimes people really could change. Sometimes forever was worth fighting for, even when everything seemed impossible. "One more chance," she whispered. "But if you break my heart again, Jared Orton—" "I won't," he said, reaching up to cup her face with hands that trembled slightly. "I swear to you I won't." And as he kissed her for the first time in 4 months, Lily felt her heart begin to heal from the inside out. Chapter 10. Love. Eternal. True love, Lily learned, wasn't the lightning strike that brought two people together. It was the steady flame that burned between them every day after, growing stronger with each choice to stay, to fight, to believe in forever, even when forever seemed impossible. 18 months later, she stood in the bridal suite of the Orton Grand Hotel, the same place where she'd first fallen into Jared's arms during that thunderstorm, and marveled at how far they'd come. The time since their reconciliation in Savannah had been spent rebuilding trust, learning to communicate openly, and proving to each other that their love was strong enough to weather any storm. They'd taken it slow this time, no rushing into passion without foundation, no grand gestures without substance. Just two people choosing each other day by day, until choosing each other forever felt as natural as breathing. "Oh, honey," Amara breathed, adjusting the delicate lace veil that had belonged to Jared's grandmother. "You look absolutely perfect." "I feel perfect," Lily said, and meant it. "For the first time in my life, I feel like everything is exactly as it should be." The past year and a half hadn't been easy. There had been difficult conversations, hurt feelings to heal, trust to rebuild brick by brick. The media attention had been intense when news of their reconciliation broke, but this time, Jared had handled it differently. This time he'd stood in front of cameras and declared his love for her without apology or explanation, making it clear that anyone who had a problem with their relationship could take it up with him personally. "Ms. Morris." A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Your grandmother would like to see you." Esperanza Morris entered the bridal suite, moving slowly but steadily, her recovery nothing short of miraculous. The woman who'd nearly died of a heart attack was now glowing with health and happiness, wearing a deep purple dress that Jared had insisted on buying for her despite her protests about the expense. "Mija," Esperanza said, tears already streaming down her cheeks as she took in Lily's appearance. "You look like an angel." "Don't cry, Granny," Lily said, though her own eyes were misty. "You'll ruin your makeup." "Let me cry," Esperanza said fiercely, taking her granddaughter's hands. "I'm allowed to cry when my baby girl is marrying the man who saved my life." "He saved mine too," Lily said softly, "in more ways than one." Esperanza studied her granddaughter's face with the wisdom of someone who'd lived long enough to recognize real happiness when she saw it. "You love him." "With everything in me," Lily confirmed, "and more importantly, I trust him. Completely." "Good," Esperanza said, squeezing her hands. "Because trust is what makes love last, Mija. Passion fades, beauty fades, but trust, that only grows stronger with time." Downstairs in the hotel's presidential suite, Jared was having his own pre-wedding conversation with Sebastian, who was serving as his best man for the second time in his life, though this wedding felt completely different from his first. "Nervous?" Sebastian asked, adjusting Jared's tie with the expertise of someone who'd been handling details for his best friend for over a decade. "Terrified," Jared admitted, but his smile was radiant. What if she changes her mind? What if she realizes she could do better? "Then she'd be an idiot," Sebastian said bluntly. "And Lily Morris is many things, but an idiot isn't one of them. She loves you, Jared, the real you, not the billionaire facade or the public image. That's a rare gift." Jared nodded, thinking about the woman who'd challenged him to be better, who'd seen through his wealth and status to the man underneath, who'd forgiven him for the biggest mistake of his life and trusted him with her heart again. "I still can't believe she said yes," he said quietly. "Neither can half of Manhattan's society pages," Sebastian said with a grin, "but the only opinion that matters is hers, right?" "Right," Jared agreed, straightening his shoulders. "Let's go get me married." The ceremony was being held in the hotel's rooftop garden, the same space where they'd shared their first kiss under the stars. Jared had wanted something intimate, personal, a celebration of their love rather than a display of wealth. The guest list was small: family, close friends, the people who truly mattered to both of them. As Jared took his place at the altar, flanked by Sebastian and Marcus, who'd surprised everyone by accepting Jared's request to stand as a groomsman, he looked out at the assembled guests and felt a peace he'd never experienced before. His business associates were there, but so were Lily's co-workers from the catering company. Manhattan socialites sat next to Esperanza's church friends from Savannah. Dr. Hassan was in the front row next to Alessandro Rivera, the restaurant owner who'd given them the perfect first date. This was what love looked like, Jared realized. Not the careful segregation of different worlds, but the beautiful chaos of two lives blending into one. The music began, not the traditional wedding march, but the jazz standard At Last that had been playing in Alessandro's restaurant the night they'd first said they loved each other. And then Lily appeared at the end of the aisle, and Jared forgot how to breathe. She was devastating in her simple elegance, but more than that, she was radiant with happiness. As she walked toward him, escorted by Marcus, her eyes never left Jared's face, and the love he saw there nearly brought him to his knees. "You clean up nice," she whispered when she reached him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You're the most beautiful woman who's ever lived," he whispered back, meaning every word. The ceremony was officiated by Father Miguel Santos, the priest who'd counseled them both through their separation, and who'd insisted that any wedding he performed should focus on the sacred nature of the commitment they were making to each other. "Marriage," Father Miguel said, his voice carrying across the garden, "is not just the joining of two people, but the creation of something entirely new. Jared and Lily, you have already weathered storms that would have destroyed lesser loves. You have learned that real love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every day, even when that choice requires courage. When it came time for vows, Jared went first, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Lily," he said, his hands gripping hers like lifelines, "you crashed into my life like lightning, and you've been illuminating my world ever since. You taught me that love isn't something to be feared or controlled, but something to be celebrated and fought for. You saw through all my walls to the man I could be, and you loved me anyway. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that love. I promise to choose you every day, in every way, for all the days of my life." Lily's vows were delivered through tears of joy. "Jared, you caught me when I was falling, and you've been holding me up ever since. You showed me that love doesn't have to be practical to be real, that sometimes the most impossible dreams are the ones worth fighting for. You've given me a love that feels like coming home to myself. I promise to love you fearlessly, to trust you completely, and to build a life with you that's worthy of the miracle we found in each other." When Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, when Jared kissed her with a tenderness that made the assembled guests sigh collectively, when they turned to face their family and friends, as Mr. and Mrs. Orton, Lily felt like the universe had finally clicked into place. The reception was a celebration of everything their love represented. Elegant but warm, sophisticated but genuine. They danced to jazz music under string lights, shared cake that Lily had insisted on making herself, despite protests about brides not catering their own weddings, and laughed with the people who'd supported them through everything. "Any regrets?" Jared asked as they swayed together during their last dance as newlyweds, the hotel suite that would be their honeymoon retreat waiting upstairs. "Just one," Lily said, pulling back to look into his storm-grey eyes. Jared's heart stopped. "What?" "I regret that it took us so long to get here," she said with a smile that was pure joy. "I regret all the time we wasted being afraid, when we could have been building this beautiful life together." "We weren't ready then," Jared said wisely. "We needed to learn how to love each other the right way. We needed to grow into the people who could make this work. And now, he said, spinning her one last time before pulling her close. Now we have forever to figure out just how beautiful love can be when it's built on the right foundation." Later, as they stood on the balcony of their honeymoon suite, looking out at the city lights of Manhattan, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a chance meeting during a thunderstorm to a love that had survived heartbreak and separation and everything the world had thrown at them. "What are you thinking about?" Jared asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Lightning," she said, leaning back against his chest. "And how sometimes the most dangerous storms bring the most beautiful things. Like love, like us," she corrected, turning in his arms to face the man who'd become her husband, her partner, her home. "Like the family we're going to build and the life we're going to create and all the storms we're going to weather together." As Jared kissed her under the Manhattan sky, both of them knew that their love story was really just beginning. They had challenges ahead, dreams to chase, a lifetime of moments to share. But they would face it all together, hand in hand, heart to heart, knowing that some love is strong enough to conquer anything. Even lightning, especially lightning. Epilogue 3 years later. The sound of children's laughter filled the penthouse garden as Lily watched her 2-year-old twins, Isabella Rose and Marcus Alexander, chase bubbles across the manicured lawn. Jared emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of lemonade, his hair slightly mussed from being used as a jungle gym by their energetic offspring. "How did we get so lucky?" Lily asked, settling into his arms as they watched their children play. "We didn't get lucky," Jared said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We got brave. We chose love over fear, and love chose us back." Above them, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rain, but neither of them was afraid of storms anymore. They'd learned that lightning could be beautiful, that thunder was just the universe's way of applauding, and that the most powerful force in the world wasn't the storm itself. It was the love that could weather any storm and come out stronger on the other side. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Lily smiled. Let it storm, she thought. We're home,